In the heart of Anatolia, a new power was stirring. This was the home of the Ottoman Beylik, a small state with big dreams. It was here around the year 1326 that a boy named Murad was born. His father was Orhan Gazi, the second ruler of this rising dynasty. His mother was a Byzantine princess named Nilüfer Hatun, originally called Holofira. This mixed heritage was common in the borderlands. It was a world where cultures, religions, and ambitions collided and mingled. Murad grew up in this exciting, sometimes dangerous environment. He was not just a prince, he was a product of a world in constant motion, a world on the edge of monumental change. Murad's childhood was not one of idle luxury spent in opulent palaces. The early Ottomans were warriors, leaders who lived and fought alongside their men. From a young age, Murad would have been trained in the arts of war. He learned to ride a horse with expert skill. He mastered the bow and the sword, tools of his future trade. He also learned about governance, sitting at his father's side, listening to the discussions of generals and advisors. The court was a classroom, and the lessons were about strategy, diplomacy, and how to rule a diverse and growing population. He was being shaped for a life of command, prepared for the immense responsibilities that lay ahead. His father, Orhan, was a canny and successful ruler. He had expanded the Ottoman lands significantly, capturing the important city of Bursa and making it his capital. Murad watched and learned as his father transformed a small principality into a formidable regional power. He saw how Orhan managed relationships with his powerful neighbors, including the declining Byzantine Empire. These were invaluable lessons in statecraft. Murad absorbed the knowledge that power was not just won on the battlefield, it was also built through clever alliances, strategic marriages, and careful administration. This was the foundation upon which Murad would build his own spectacular career. As a young man, Murad was given his own responsibilities. He was appointed as the governor of Bursa, the capital city, when his father was away on campaign. This was a test of his abilities. He had to manage the city's affairs, ensure justice was done, and keep the peace. It was his first real taste of power and the heavy weight of leadership. He proved himself to be a capable and diligent administrator. This experience was crucial. It showed everyone, including his father, that Murad was more than just a warrior prince. He was a ruler in the making, ready to take the reins when the time came. The path to the Ottoman throne was not always a straight one. It was often a brutal contest, where only the strongest and most cunning son would succeed. Murad had an older brother, Suleiman Pasha. Suleiman was a brilliant military commander, his father's favorite, and the heir apparent. He was the one who had led the first Ottoman forces across the Dardanelles Strait and into Europe. It seemed certain that Suleiman would be the next sultan. History, however, had other plans. In 1357, a tragic accident changed the course of the Ottoman dynasty forever. Suleiman died during a hunting accident, falling from his horse. His unexpected death sent shockwaves through the court. With his older brother gone, Murad suddenly became the most likely successor to his father. The weight of expectation now fell squarely on his shoulders. He was around 30 years old, a man in his prime with proven experience in both fighting and governing. His father, Orhan, was getting old and his health was failing. The empire needed a strong hand to guide it. Murad stepped into the role of heir, taking on more military commands and greater political responsibilities. He had to prove to the army and the court that he was a worthy replacement for his celebrated brother. It was a challenging position, but one that Murad was well prepared for. In 1362, Sultan Orhan Gazi passed away after a long and glorious reign. The moment had arrived for Murad to claim his inheritance. The transition of power in the Ottoman state could be a bloody affair, with brothers often fighting to the death for the throne. Murad, however, acted swiftly and decisively to secure his position. He had the support of the army and the key figures in the administration. He immediately traveled to Bursa to be formally declared the new sultan. His accession was relatively smooth, a testament to the authority he had already built up as a prince and heir. Upon becoming Sultan Murad I, he did not rest. He knew that his rule had to be cemented with action, not just words. One of his first acts was to deal with potential rivals within his own family. Historical accounts suggest he had to confront and eliminate his younger brothers, Ibrahim and Halil, who may have challenged his claim to the throne. This was a harsh reality of royal succession in that era. It was seen as a necessary if brutal step to prevent civil war and ensure the stability of the state. With his power now undisputed, Sultan Murad I could turn his full attention to the grand project of empire building. Sultan Murad I inherited a state that was already expanding, but he had a vision that was far grander than his father's. While his predecessors had focused on consolidating power in Anatolia, Murad turned his gaze firmly towards the west. He saw the Balkans in southeastern Europe as a land of opportunity. The once mighty Byzantine Empire was a shadow of its former self. The various Balkan kingdoms of the Serbs, Bulgarians, and others were divided by rivalries. They were ripe for conquest. Murad believed it was his destiny to carry the banner of the Ottomans deep into Christian Europe. This was a bold and ambitious new direction for the empire. Murad was a relentless campaigner. He spent most of his reign on the battlefield leading his armies in person. He was a master strategist, combining swift military strikes with clever diplomacy. He didn't just conquer territory, he absorbed it. He would often turn local Christian lords into his vassals. This meant they could keep their lands and titles, but they had to pay tribute to him and provide soldiers for his army. This was a very effective way to expand his influence without overstretching his own resources. It allowed the Ottoman presence to grow steadily, piece by piece, across the Balkan Peninsula. His campaigns began almost as soon as he took the throne. In the 1360s, his forces swept through Thrace, the European region just beyond Constantinople. They captured key fortresses and towns, establishing a permanent Ottoman foothold in Europe. The Byzantine emperor had little power to stop them. He was trapped in his capital city of Constantinople, surrounded by the rising tide of Ottoman power. Murad's conquests were not just random raids, they were part of a systematic plan to encircle Constantinople and control the major trade and military routes of the region. The culmination of this early campaign was a truly game-changing achievement. Murad's forces targeted the city of Adrianople, known today as Edirne. It was the second most important city in the Byzantine Empire after Constantinople itself. Capturing it would be a huge military and symbolic victory. The Balkan powers knew the danger and tried to form an alliance to stop him. But Murad's disciplined and motivated army proved too strong. The conquest of Adrianople was a turning point. It announced to the world that the Ottomans were not just raiders from Anatolia. They were a European power, and they were here to stay. The city of Adrianople was a prize of immense strategic value. Located in Thrace, it commanded the major roads leading into the heart of the Balkan Peninsula. For Murad I, capturing it was not just another conquest, it was the key to unlocking Europe. In 1369, after a series of campaigns that had isolated the city, Murad's forces laid siege to it. The Byzantine defenders fought bravely, but they were cut off and outnumbered. The fall of the city was inevitable. When Adrianople finally fell to the Ottomans, it sent a shockwave across the Christian world. A major European city was now in the hands of a Muslim sultan. Murad did something completely unexpected after capturing the city. Instead of just looting it or making it a provincial outpost, he made a revolutionary decision. He moved his capital from Bursa in Anatolia to Adrianople in Europe. He renamed it Edirne. This was a hugely significant move. It signaled a profound shift in the Ottoman identity and ambition. The Ottomans were no longer just an Anatolian Turkish state with a foothold in Europe. By making Edirne their capital, they were declaring themselves a European empire. Their future, Murad decided, lay in the west. Life in the new capital of Edirne began to change immediately. Murad began a massive building program. He commissioned grand mosques, public baths, covered markets and palaces. He wanted to transform Edirne into a worthy capital for his growing empire, a city that would rival the old glories of Constantinople. Muslim scholars, merchants, and administrators were encouraged to move to the city, but Murad was also pragmatic. He allowed the Christian population to remain, practice their faith, and continue their trades as long as they accepted his rule. This policy of relative tolerance helped to ensure the stability and prosperity of his new European base. From their new capital at Edirne, the Ottomans could now project their power more effectively throughout the Balkans. The city became the main military base for all future campaigns into Europe. Soldiers and supplies could be gathered and organized there before marching north and west. The move to Edirne also put immense pressure on the remaining Byzantine territories. Constantinople, the ancient capital of the Eastern Roman Empire, was now squeezed between Ottoman lands in Anatolia and Ottoman lands in Europe. The city was almost completely surrounded, its final fall now seeming like just a matter of time. Murad's bold decision had redrawn the map of power in the region. As Murad I's empire expanded, he ran into a pretty big challenge. He needed an army that was totally loyal to him, the Sultan, and no one else. Now, the traditional Turkish warriors called Ghazis were well known for their bravery and effectiveness, but the thing is, they still held strong ties to their own tribes and local leaders. Murad realized he needed a force that stood apart from these old loyalties. So his solution was honestly revolutionary, and it ended up shaping the Ottoman Empire for centuries. He established a new elite infantry corps called the Janissaries, which literally means new soldiers. This was actually the first standing army in Europe since the days of the Roman legions. To build up this new army, Murad introduced a unique and, well, controversial system called the devsirme. Basically, it was a kind of levy or tax placed on the Christian subjects living in the Balkans. Every so often, Ottoman officials would visit Christian villages and select a certain number of young boys, typically between the ages of 8 and 18. These boys were taken from their families and brought to the capital. It must have been an absolutely heartbreaking experience for the families left behind, but for the boys themselves, this was the beginning of a remarkable and unexpected journey, one that could eventually lead to great power and wealth within the Ottoman state. Once they arrived, the boys were converted to Islam and put through a really long and rigorous training program. They learned the Turkish language, the principles of their new faith, and most importantly, the art of war. They weren't allowed to marry or have any ties outside the corps. Their only family became their fellow soldiers, and their only father was the Sultan. This whole process was carefully designed to create a close-knit band of brothers, a military elite whose loyalty could never be questioned. The Janissaries were trained to be the best soldiers in the world, disciplined, fearless, and totally devoted to the Sultan's will. Pretty quickly, the Janissaries became the backbone of the Ottoman military. Armed first with bows and later with firearms, they were a truly formidable force on the battlefield. Their discipline and training gave the Ottomans a huge edge over the more feudal armies of their European rivals. But, the devsirme system didn't just produce soldiers. The brightest and most talented boys weren't sent to the army barracks. Instead, they were sent to the palace school, where they received an education to become the top administrators, governors, and even grand viziers of the empire. This way, the state was run by a class of people who owed everything they had to the Sultan alone. Sultan Murad I was more than just a warrior and a statesman. He was also the head of a large and complex royal household. His family life was, deeply intertwined with the politics of the empire. Marriages were not just personal matters, they were powerful tools of diplomacy. Murad, like his father Orhan, used strategic marriages to build alliances and secure territories. For example, he married his son Bayezid to the daughter of a powerful Turkish ruler in Anatolia, which helped bring that region under Ottoman influence. He also married his daughters to important allied rulers, spreading the web of Ottoman power even further. Murad was a devout Muslim, and his faith was a guiding force in his life and his rule. He saw his conquests in Europe as part of a holy struggle, or Gaza, to expand the frontiers of Islam. He used the title Ghazi, or Holy Warrior, with great pride. This religious motivation was a powerful tool for inspiring his soldiers and justifying his wars. He was also, honestly, a great patron of Islamic architecture and learning. He funded the construction of mosques, schools, called madrasas, and public charities throughout his empire, from Bursa to his new capital in Edirne. These buildings were not just places of worship, they were symbols of the new Ottoman Islamic order he was building. Life in the Sultan's harem was a world of its own, governed by strict rules and hierarchies. Murad had several wives and concubines who were the mothers of his children. His principal wives, like the Bulgarian princess Tamara Hatun, held positions of influence and prestige. The harem was not just a place of pleasure, it was the nursery of the dynasty. It was here that the future rulers of the empire were born and raised. The mothers of the princes especially vied for influence, hoping that their son would one day sit on the throne. This created an environment of intense rivalry and political intrigue within the palace walls. Among Murad's sons, two stand out in history: Bayezid and Yaqub. Both were trained as warriors from a young age and often accompanied their father on his campaigns. There was an inevitable rivalry between the brothers, as they both knew that only one of them could succeed their father. Murad had to manage this rivalry carefully to prevent it from destabilizing the state. He gave them both important commands in the army, allowing them to prove their worth. This was the Ottoman way. Princes were tested in the fire of battle. Their performance would determine their future and the future of the empire itself. By the early 1370s, the Christian powers of the Balkans were growing increasingly alarmed. Murad's capture of Adrianople and his relentless push westward was a threat they could no longer ignore. The Serbian rulers of Macedonia, the brothers Vukasin and Ugljesa Mrnjavčević, decided it was time to act. They saw an opportunity to strike a decisive blow against the Ottomans, while Murad himself was busy with campaigns in Anatolia. They gathered a large Christian coalition army, estimated to be tens of thousands strong. Their plan was to march on the Ottoman capital, Edirne, and drive the Turks out of Europe for good. In 1371, the Serbian-led army advanced towards Edirne. They were confident of victory. They camped for the night near the Maritsa River, close to the town of Chernomen. It is said that they were celebrating their impending victory a little too early, with much feasting and drinking. They underestimated their enemy. The Ottoman commander in Europe, Lala Sahin Pasha, was one of Murad's most experienced and brilliant generals. He did not have a large army with him, but he had something better surprise. He learned of the Christian army's location and their complacent attitude. He decided to launch a daring night attack. Under the cover of darkness, Lala Sahin Pasha's much smaller Ottoman force fell upon the sleeping Christian camp. The result was a complete and utter catastrophe for the Balkan army. Caught completely by surprise, thousands were killed in the initial assault, or drowned in the Maritsa River as they tried to flee in panic. Both of the Serbian kings, Vukasin and Ugljesa, were killed in the chaos. The battle, which became known as the Battle of the Maritsa or the Rout of the Serbs, was an overwhelming Ottoman victory. It was achieved with cunning and audacity against a much larger but poorly led force. The consequences of the Battle of the Maritsa were enormous. The backbone of Serbian military power in Macedonia was broken in a single night. The path was now wide open for Murad to expand his control over Macedonia, parts of Greece and Bulgaria. Many of the remaining Balkan princes and lords, terrified by this display of Ottoman power, had no choice but to accept Murad's authority. They became his vassals, agreeing to pay him tribute and serve in his army. The battle effectively sealed the fate of the southern Balkans. The dream of a united Christian front to drive out the Ottomans was shattered on the banks of the Maritsa. After the victory at Maritsa, Murad I continued his conquests, pushing deeper into the Balkans. By the late 1380s, the main power left to challenge him was the northern Serbian kingdom, led by the determined Prince Lazar. Lazar worked tirelessly to build a grand coalition to confront the Ottoman threat one last time. He gathered an army that included not just Serbs, but also Bosnian, Albanian, and other Balkan contingents. This was to be the ultimate showdown. In the summer of 1389, the two massive armies met on a plain in modern-day Kosovo. The place was known as Kosovo Polje, the Field of Blackbirds. The battle was one of the largest and most ferocious of the entire medieval period. Sultan Murad I, now in his 60s but still a formidable warrior, commanded the Ottoman army in person. His two sons, Bayezid and Yakub, led the right and left wings. Facing them was Prince Lazar, at the head of his coalition of Christian knights. The fate of the entire Balkan region hung in the balance. The fighting began on the morning of June 15, 1389. The battle raged for hours with incredible ferocity. Both sides fought with desperate courage, and the casualties were immense on both sides. The course of the battle is shrouded in the mists of legend and conflicting accounts. It seems the Serbian knights, with their heavy cavalry, had some initial success breaking through the Ottoman left wing, but the Ottoman center, commanded by Murad himself, held firm. Then the Ottoman right wing, led by the skilled and impetuous Prince Bayezid, launched a devastating counterattack. Bayezid's speed and ferocity on that day would earn him the nickname Yildirim, or the Thunderbolt. His charge turned the tide of the battle, shattering the Christian lines and leading to the capture of Prince Lazar. The Battle of Kosovo was a victory for the Ottomans, but it came at a terrible price. The Serbian army was destroyed as an effective fighting force, and their leader, Prince Lazar, was executed after the battle. Serbia would now become a vassal state of the Ottomans. However, the Ottoman army also suffered huge losses. the field was littered with the bodies of thousands of their best soldiers. And in a dramatic and shocking twist, the victorious Sultan, Murad I, would not live to see the end of the day. His triumph and his life would end together on that bloody field. The death of Sultan Murad I is one of the most famous and dramatic stories in Ottoman history. The exact details are debated by historians, but the most widely told version is a tale of incredible daring. According to the legend, as the Battle of Kosovo was ending, a Serbian knight named Milos Obilic pretended to be a deserter. He gained access to the Sultan's tent, saying he had important information. As he knelt before Murad, supposedly to kiss his feet in submission, he suddenly pulled out a hidden dagger and stabbed the Sultan, mortally wounding him. It was an act of final, desperate defiance. Whether this story is true or not, the fact is that Murad I was killed at the Battle of Kosovo. He is the only Ottoman Sultan to ever die on the battlefield. His death, at the very moment of his greatest victory, was a shocking end to a remarkable reign. His son Bayezid, who was right there on the battlefield, had to act immediately. To prevent any challenge to his authority, he had his brother Yaqub, who had fought bravely during the battle, executed on the spot. Bayezid then took command of the army, and was declared the new Sultan. The dynasty was secured, even as the empire mourned its fallen leader. Murad I's importance in history cannot be overstated. He was the true architect of the Ottoman Empire. He took the small state he inherited from his father and transformed it into a world power. His reign of nearly 30 years was one of constant conquest and expansion. He more than doubled the size of the empire, securing Ottoman rule over much of the Balkans. His decision to move the capital to Edirne fundamentally changed the empire's character, making it a European power. He was a game-changer who set the Ottoman Empire on the path it would follow for the next 500 years. Murad's legacy is written in blood and stone. The blood was shed on the many battlefields from Maritsa to Kosovo that secured his empire. The stone can be seen in the mosques, bridges, and public buildings he commissioned in Bursa and Edirne. But his most enduring legacy was the creation of the Janissary Corps and the Devshirme system. These institutions provided the military and administrative backbone for the empire for centuries. Murad I was a brilliant strategist, a ruthless conqueror, and a visionary builder of institutions. He laid the foundations upon which his successors, like Mehmed the Conqueror, would build one of the greatest empires the world has ever seen.